suspicious male, and just he's wandering around the block?
Yes, walking up and down the blocks with a hood on, and just stopping in front of some houses, and it keeps going, then he stops.
A deep voice came over the 911 line, describing a suspicious man wandering aimlessly down a side street in Howard Beach, Queens, New York. In the middle of a sweltering afternoon, the image was a lost and unsettling piece, a small but foreboding sign that something was about to happen. Karina Vetrano, 30, is the epitome of a New York girl, athletic, active, and always smiling. Every day she jogged along the tree-lined paths leading into Spring Creek Park, a simple routine she and her father had maintained for years. She loved being in nature, where the fresh air and sunsets always brought a sense of peace. But that day, a seemingly ordinary day, was different. The air was stifling. The trees along the path stood still in the silence. Somewhere a silent gaze followed, a shadow appeared, and an uncomfortable silence crept into Karina's every step. That was August 2nd, 2016, the day everything changed forever. On the afternoon of August 2nd, 2016, Karina Vetrano left her familiar home to start her usual jogging routine, a simple habit that she never thought would turn into a cruel fate. She ran alone that day when her father, who usually accompanied her, could not go with her due to a minor injury. After just a few steps, fate took an irreversible turn. At the same time, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis appeared near the park. No one knew what brought him there that day. Between two strangers, an unexpected encounter occurred, and in a brief moment, tragedy began. There was no warning. No warning sounded. The confrontation between Karina and Chanel Lewis was swift and brutal in the middle of deserted, isolated streets. As it turned out, a conflict erupted. The exact cause remains a mystery, but the outcome was irreversible. Karina, with incredible willpower and strength, fought to the last breath. The marks at the scene and the injuries on her body told one thing clearly. It was a life and death struggle that she did not easily succumb to. The Howard Beach community was then plunged into shock and grief. No one could believe that, on a seemingly ordinary afternoon, such a brutal crime could have occurred in the heart of a peaceful neighborhood. As dusk fell over the Queen's sky, an uneasy feeling rose in Phil Vetrano's heart. Karina, his punctual and careful daughter, had not returned from her usual jog for too long. He knew something was wrong. Without hesitation, Phil and his friends immediately split up to search, weaving through the winding paths and dense bushes of Spring Creek Park, where they had walked so many times. But this time, the familiar scene suddenly became cold and full of uncertainty. Every patch of dirt, every branch seemed to be silent under the weight of anxiety. Time passed slowly, and the fragile hope that Karina had only encountered a minor accident gradually faded. Then they found her, lying motionless in the tall grass, in a remote area where no one expected her. The scene was seared into the father's mind, a painful memory that would never fade. Mr. Phil immediately called 911 in desperation. The police quickly arrived at the scene. Flashlights swept through the bushes, revealing a horrifying truth. Karina's body lay on one side, her clothes disheveled, her body covered in wounds. One hand was still clutching grass and mud, the last traces of her desperate attempt to survive. Immediately, the area was sealed off. Yellow tape covered the path, keeping the scene intact. Family and neighbors could only watch from a distance, grieving over a truth so cruel that no one could have foreseen. However, the initial clues were too few. No witnesses, no security cameras. Only a few faint shoe prints in the damp soil, a few strands of hair caught in a tree branch, faint traces amid the gloom that hung over the neighborhood. Howard Beach lay awake that night. Fear was everywhere. Everyone knew something terrible had happened, and the perpetrator was still lurking somewhere in the darkness, unaccounted for. As the headlights swept through the dense undergrowth, the crime scene slowly emerged in the flickering light, a chaotic and haunting picture. Every broken branch, every trace imprinted on the damp ground could be a link to the truth of what Karina Vetrano experienced that fateful afternoon. The forensic team immediately went to work, scouring every inch of the ground, carefully recording every detail, no matter how small. Messy shoe prints, faint drag marks, and broken branches clearly indicated a fierce struggle had taken place. Beside the body were torn pieces of cloth, the remains of a life-and-death battle that Karina fought to her last breath. The autopsy results quickly determined the cause of death. Karina had been strangled to death. On her body, countless bruises and scratches, especially concentrated on the face, neck, and arms. The unmistakable marks of a victim desperately fighting for her life. But the most important detail lies under her fingernails. Strange DNA samples were collected and carefully preserved, becoming valuable evidence that guided the journey to solve the case. In addition, investigators also discovered a strange footprint leading deep into the deserted area and disappearing near a small canal. That seemingly trivial clue was the key to helping them visualize the direction of the attacker's movement after committing the crime. However, apart from that little physical evidence, the case did not leave any other clear traces. Only the pieces of the puzzle quietly lay in the dark space, forcing investigators to patiently search for every smallest detail. And then, that very DNA sample became the first link, the beginning of a journey to find the perpetrator that no one could have expected. Shortly after the autopsy was completed, the New York police faced a daunting problem. No witnesses, no cameras, no motive. The murder of Karina Vetrano immediately enveloped the Howard Beach community in panic and fear. No one knew who the killer was. No one felt safe. In the early days, the authorities launched a large-scale investigation, checking every suspect in the Spring Creek area, from homeless people, criminals with criminal records, to individuals with unusual behavior. But every lead fell into a dead end. None of them were related to this crime. The only ray of hope came from a sample of DNA found under Karina's fingernails, a trace showing that she fought back and left evidence on her own body. The DNA sample was analyzed quickly, but the results did not match any records in the national database, leaving the investigation at a dead end. It was only when a small memory was recalled that the situation changed. Lieutenant John Russo, a local officer, recalled seeing a young man with strange behavior, wandering around with a hood up in the hot sun, appearing near the park a few months earlier. The unsettling feeling at the time now became a valuable clue. Following this lead, the police found Chanel Lewis, 20, who lived with her mother not far from the scene. Lewis had no criminal record, was a withdrawn person with little social interaction. When invited to work, he was cooperative but could not hide his unusual psychological symptoms. Initial interrogations did not bring any breakthroughs. Lewis completely denied being at the park that day. But under the pressure of skillful questioning and subtle psychological guidance, each contradiction in his testimony gradually became clear. Step by step, the truth was revealed. Lewis finally admitted to meeting Karina that day and attacking her after feeling frustrated and losing control.
You said as she got next to you, when she got next to you as she was running and you were walking, what happened then?
And then, because of a past situation, I got angry and then started hitting her and stuff like that.
Okay. Before you did, where did you hit her?
Like in the face and like in the mouth.
In the face and the mouth. Mm-hmm. Before you hit her, did you grab her or did you just hit her right away?
Like kind of grabbed her first.
Grabbed her?
Although the confession was incomplete, It was enough to help investigators focus on him as the main suspect. Lewis's DNA sample was later collected, and the results confirmed that it matched the traces on the victim's body. On February 4, 2017, Chanel Lewis was officially arrested on charges of murder and assault of Karina Vetrano.
Chanel, anything you have to say? Chanel, why were you hiding out? Were you hiding out for 6 months? Chanel. Chanel, anything you have to say to the family?
Uniform! Uniform!
I'm not Christian.
The arrest was conducted carefully, strictly following the legal process to ensure that no loopholes could shake the case. News of the arrest quickly spread. Many people breathed a sigh of relief when the suspect was brought to light. But at the same time, controversies also flared up. The defense argued that Lewis, who was mentally unstable, may have been manipulated during the interrogation. Some fear that racial bias may have inadvertently influenced the investigation, given that the suspect was African American and the victim was white. The case went beyond a shocking crime and quickly became the center of profound social debate about human rights, fairness in the legal system, and the biases that can silently influence the search for truth. But the investigators remained steadfast in their core principle, that only objective evidence is the only guide. And now, with forensic records, confessions, and psychological analyses in hand, they are ready to move on to the next chapter, the public trial that the whole country is watching. In early 2019, nearly 3 years after Karina Vetrano was murdered, Chanel Lewis's trial officially began in Queens Supreme Court in New York. The city seemed to be silent. Each hearing was packed with people, reporters, family members, and members of the public who had followed the heartbreaking story from the beginning. The prosecution focused on 3 key pieces of the puzzle: matching DNA, the defendant's confession, and details from the crime scene that matched Lewis's description. They emphasized that while the murder showed no signs of premeditation, it was still an unforgivable act of brutal violence. The image of Karina, fighting to the last breath, was recalled as a testament to the brutality of the crime. The defense argued that Lewis's confession may not be valid because their client was mentally ill and lacked knowledge of his legal rights. They also raised concerns that racial bias may have influenced the investigation and trial, as Lewis was African American and the victim was white. These arguments made the courtroom atmosphere tense, attracting widespread attention from the media across the country. Karina's family sat quietly in the front row. They had been through it all, from the pain of losing their child to the months of waiting for justice to be served. When they faced the man accused of taking their daughter's life, they kept their composure, but their eyes could not hide the tears flowing back into their hearts. Finally, after many days of debate, the jury returned the verdict. Chanel Lewis was convicted of first-degree murder and criminal assault. A life sentence without parole was handed down. When the verdict was announced, the courtroom fell silent, a tragic moment that left a lasting impression on all present. Outside the courthouse, public opinion was divided into 2 distinct camps. One camp believed that justice had been served, that the Vetrano family could finally find some peace amid their unfathomable grief. On the other, skeptical voices continued to rise, worrying about the risk of legal errors, about invisible biases in the judicial system. For Karina's family, the verdict could not return their beloved daughter, but at least it brought to an end a long journey filled with tears and loss. a journey in search of justice that, though belated, was finally served. The trial has ended, but the wound that the Karina Vetrano case left behind has not yet healed in the hearts of family, friends, and the Howard Beach community. They have lost not only a child, a friend, but also a sense of peace that seemed obvious in everyday life. In just a short moment, a life full of dreams was taken away by an irreversible act of cruelty. This case is not only the pain of a family, it is a wake-up call for all of us about the fragility of personal safety, something that people sometimes only realize when it is too late. In a modern society with so much progress, there are still invisible dark spots, dangerous things that quietly lurk in the most normal things. Behind that tragedy are also painful questions about social justice and how invisible prejudice can influence the journey to find the truth. In this complex and unpredictable world, is justice always served objectively and fairly? And have we, as people in society, really done enough to protect each other from unnecessary tragedies? Although the verdict has been passed, the loss is irreparable, and the final question remains, haunting and unanswered. If just one small factor had changed, a different path, a different moment, could that tragedy have been prevented? And most of all, what can we do today to prevent similar tragedies from happening again?